You're listening to the 14th Source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, July 1st, 2022. It is technically 4th of July weekend for those in the States, even though 4th of July is on a Monday.
For those who celebrate.
That's the... Oh boy! Anything going on in the news, Andrew? Anything? No, anyway. I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to get mad on a podcast.
Yeah. So I actually, I'm really not doing anything nerdy or geeky. I started graduate school this last week.
So we're definitely leaning into that overeducated codependent host.
I gotta, so like, all I've been doing is going to class,
Right? Your brain is just filled with knowledge.
That's
homework assignments.
Yeah, something like that. Homework assignments. I don't know if
right. When you close your eyes at night, all you see is canvas.
Yes, actually. Although, let's not get started about that. That's a touchy
Canvas.
issue.
For those that don't know, Canvas is like a educational, like, what do you call it?
What do they call it? A learning management system, I think is what they call it.
It's a website, basically.
It's a website. It is.
We can do school stuff.
You can do school stuff. Yeah, it's a website for school stuff. It's not bad. It's very particular.
Yep. Yeah. I think the joke made into the outtakes last week or the week before how it just academia is a little slow on the uptake of new and useful technology, and Andrew's experiencing that firsthand.
I am.
So, as he works through that, it reminds me, not to get philosophical here, but just like every problem, Andrew, sometimes some crimes go slipping through the cracks, but these two gumshoes are picking up.
What are you singing there, Dan? Is that the theme song to a new movie, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers?
Absolutely not. It's the theme song to a beloved television series from the 80s, perhaps early 90s. But it does kind of tie into what we're going to be talking about this week. We're going to take it kind of easy this week. We have both now watched, I took forever, I apologize for that, the new movie called Chip and Dale.
Rescue Rangers?
Okay, I'll say it. A movie came out last month?
Yeah, I think it was
maybe it was the beginning of this month, I can't remember. They call it Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers. And we've talked about, I think, the trailer on the show before, because when that trailer dropped, we're like, what is happening? Because it looked less like a Rescue Rangers story, which I agree with, and more like a weird new version of Who Framed Roger Rabbit or Wreck-It Ralph or something like that, but starring Chip and Dale, voiced by Andy Samberg and John Mulaney. John Mulaney's Chip, Andy Samberg's Dale. I went in. I'm gonna just throw my experience out here because I think I was skeptical straight ahead. I think when we talked about it last time, I'm like, this, from my angle, I'm like, this looks like the craziest idea that's come out of Disney in a while. Like very meta, very self-aware, because it's clear the characters are Chip and Dale, but they're not the Rescue Rangers. It's Chip and Dale who played the characters in the TV show Rescue Rangers. And it was like really self-aware, very meta, which is like, Disney does not really take those swings in a lot of senses. But then for me, also, and as a huge Rescue Rangers fan, like I would love like just a straight up action adventure Rescue Rangers movie. So I was kind of split. And I went into it a little skeptical. But I will say, the movie is great. I really liked it. But it's not a Rescue Rangers movie.
Right. So it's definitely a weird choice, right? Because you have this movie that the name makes it sound like it's going to be, a movie about this beloved animated television show, and it is, but not in the way you expect, right? It is.
It is about the animated television
It's about it's almost like the behind the scenes kind of story. And it's also weird because, as you mentioned, it has this Who Framed Roger Rabbit quality where you have animated characters sharing space with with people, with real people,
Right.
real actors.
And animated characters from all walks of ownership.
Right. Yes. It's some in very surprising ways. So it is that weird thing where it is kind of doing that same thing that Who Framed Roger Rabbit did, but with this this other context of the original cartoon. And it is kind of a, the story is not too surprising. It starts with kind of an origin story of these two characters, how they met and how they got into television doing this beloved children's show. But then how after, how that broke up, how their relationship kind of, ended at the end of the television show. Now it's basically fast forward 20 years. What are they doing now? What are these actors that played these characters, who also, by the way, are named Chip and Dale, and they play characters named Chip and Dale, right? And kind of what is it that they're doing now? And of course, then a mystery ends up kind of evolving. That maybe slips through the cracks, and these two out of work actors are picking up the slack.
Right. One's just working a convention circuit, the other one's an insurance salesman.
Right.
But you know what? Honestly, there's no case too big or small, so they can. When you need help, just call them.
Yeah, right.
And
so it is a weird, because it is kind of like doing these two things. But the one thing I will say is this Who Framed Roger Rabbit of mixed animation and live actors is weird, because it's been 30 years since Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out.
89, 88 or 89, one of those two.
Right, and that movie was, at the time, was exclusively, kind of classic animation and live actors, right? Whereas this, now it's been 30 years. Right. They even make jokes about, the fact that there's now computer animation. There's other stuff, right? Right. I think probably the most iconic sequence being that, the revelation that Dale has undergone the surgery.
The CGI surgery.
The CGI surgery. He's now a 3D animated character, while Chip is still this animated hand-drawn chipmunk. It is
ostensibly.
Yeah, of course. But it is, so it is a weird movie, right?
Right.
And the idea that their characters are like, oh yeah, I loved your show. You're like, oh, it's weird, right? It's a movie about these people that were in the show, except they're still chipmunks.
It's interesting. I think that sort of mix, that Roger Rabbit effect of animated characters mixing with live action actors. I think it hits different now, because back in 88, 89, I think it was 88, that just wasn't done because it's hard. It's hard because it was all hand drawn animation, and so it's a matter of not only drawing on top of, not literally on top of film, but placing drawings on mixing film and art and animation, but making sure the animation syncs up with camera moves, with lighting.
Right.
And when it's all done by hand, it's really, really hard. But the thing is, that itself is what CG is now, right? We've been making Who Framed Roger Rabbit for 30 years, right? That's a mix of animation and live action, right? That's Lord of the Rings. That's every
Marvel movie,
right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it hits as hard as Roger Rabbit did back then, but I think adding the sort of meta layer on top of it, like, oh no, these are characters from a TV show, and they admit they're characters from a TV show. I think that's it's getting more nuanced with the premise that makes it really have an impact, more than the actual technological feat itself. And it really makes me wonder if there is, of course the future is always going to prove me wrong, but like, what kind of technological feat of animation, or that sort of mix, that combining of animation and live action, could we actually do to make everybody go wow? What could we still do to make everybody go wow? That's something I've never seen before, and that in its own right is blowing my mind. I don't know, right? But that in itself, just mixing those two things, isn't as special anymore as it was back then, for a variety of reasons. But like I said, mostly because we see it all the time, right? Mm-hmm. But it's cool that they based a movie around this premise and they're calling it out. Did you catch the Roger Rabbit? Aside from the Roger Rabbit Easter egg,
I don't think so.
a villain.
Also, I haven't seen that movie since like 1980.
No. The Roger Rabbit Easter egg in Chip and Dale, aside from Roger Rabbit himself.
Wait. No, I mean.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I did, but also I wouldn't know these because I haven't seen that movie. It's like,
well, spoiler alert. Skip ahead 10 seconds from now. There's a moment where a villain unrolls like a bag of, torture tools, and one of the tools on there is a bottle of some sort of goo, and it's marked dip, which is the chemical thing they used to kill tunes with back in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
I have not seen that movie,
very cool.
So I would not have.
I've also seen that movie a lot. So,
but I mean, for me, I think I do think that for me, the movie, like, it was, even though it isn't as technically impressive, right, as it was, I actually think because it is so clear that they're mixing styles of animation, right? You have these, you have the 3D characters don't necessarily stand out as much, but the 2D characters, even though they're clearly being rendered probably in 3D, or at least most of the time, right?
It's a mix. The main characters there are some background characters that are clearly hand drawn for some reason. I don't know why.
But just to have it all, and then for example, they even have the point where they make the joke about the uncanny. Oh, we have to go to the valley, right? And it's the valley is the uncanny valley where it's all those early 3D rendered characters who all are like awkward, right?
So good.
And that's the kind of thing where for me it was just like, oh wow, it isn't not as technically impressive, but good that they're mixing all this up and making it work, right? To have the whatever, I don't know what his name is, the Viking motion capture Viking dwarf guy or whatever, who just like is awkward and can't look right, he's like, I can't look around because that's the motion he's limited to. Yeah,
he's like,
or
I'm staring
you can't
right at
tell
you.
He's looking right because the animation's bad, and that's a cute joke, and I think really kind of the unexpected role in the movie, I think, is, even though I think it was alluded to in the trailer, was Ugly Sonic, right? This idea, and it's almost to the point where you have to ask, like, holy shit, was this all planned? It wasn't, right? But so for those who don't know, right, when they released the trailer for the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie, Sonic was ugly. Like, he was just, it's like they missed the mark. And of course they went and redid it, and they released the movie and everyone liked it. However, the idea that that bad version of Sonic is a character in this movie, right?
It's interesting because the Sonic the Hedgehog, that movie did something that's just unprecedented, which is they caved to fan demand and completely redesigned the model for the Ultimate movie to make it look more like, and this is the right choice, make it look like the character we've known for 30 years. But it's interesting because this movie's kind of about fandom, right? And actually, it almost is a beautiful accident, I would say, where that ugly Sonic, this becomes like a major plot point.
He helps save the day.
He does, and it was just blindsided. I heard that he was in it, but he had a whole scene to himself, and like I said, it was a major plot point where he helped save the day. It was crazy. It really turned me around on it. Any skepticism. It's still not a Rescue Rangers movie, but good goddamn. This movie knew exactly. People making this movie knew exactly what they were doing, and every choice where it could have gone real bad or just been stupid or schmaltzy was was just perfect. It was like it's a movie for animation nerds in a lot of ways, or Disney nerds or whatever. It was just candy in that regard because of stuff like Ugly Sonic and the references to Dip
and some of the characters they had.
Oh man. Oh, and the bootleg,
right. So
the bootlegging of characters.
One of the features of the premises of the film is that there are these people who are basically making bootleg Disney films, and they actually had like some kind of like, oh my god, that is like a knockoff Disney film, right? And was it one of the Aladdin? I forget what they was called, and they all had terrible names
Aladdin,
too, right? No, there's a lot of really weird stuff like that. It's kind of a potpourri of references to things. I mean, characters from other like things that Disney doesn't own. Now, the one thing as I was watching, I'm like, oh, of course Disney can do this. They own everything. But then there were some things that they don't own, right? All sorts of like My Little Pony, South Park, the cats from Cats.
Yeah, you're right. Yes.
All sorts of just all sorts of out there stuff. Batman, right? Mm-hmm. So it's this weird movie that is kind of the story. One thing I would say is if you're not familiar with the actual Chippendales Rescue Rangers, you would still watch this movie and you just get the idea that it's about these these characters from a popular show, the actors that made this popular show in the 90s or whatever a while back, and kind of where they're at now, and you could pretty much follow along, right? And get a lot of these just bizarre jokes and classic Disney references in negative contexts, right? Like like being able to like kind of make fun of Disney at certain points, which I thought was really surprising because there's always that feeling that Disney doesn't like disparaging itself or its properties, but here they're like, actually, I mean, for example, well, no, that's a spoiler. Don't want to reveal who the bad guy is, but like the villain of the movie is like a kind of a big deal, right? Is an iconic Disney character.
Yeah.
The idea that it's like, no, he's bad now.
That's something that popped up while we were watching it. And Nicole said this, and I was like, no, you're dumb. I didn't say that, but like, I was reactionary. And then as I watched it, I'm like, no, you're right. And the question is this: is this a kid's movie, or is this a family film?
No, this is
I don't think so.
Adult movie. It's
dark. I don't have it. I actually wonder what it's rated. But it reminds me of when we talked about the Ninja Turtles game last week. It's an animated movie made for 40-year-olds, right? Which is actually really cool because that's a whole other conversation we can have. Just as media gets older. Naturally, its offerings and audiences grow, and I think we saw this with comic books. I think it's getting better now. We're like, oh, comics are for kids, right? But as the industry has stuck around, as more publishers got involved, as people become more aware, we realize that there's comics for kids, there's comics for adults, there's comics for people of all walks of life, and there's superhero comics for all those people, but also indie comics and whatever, horror comics, fantasy comics, literary comics. Comics are for everyone, but I still think there's a bit of a stigma for animation where it's like, oh no, animation is for kids, and this is, and we've seen attempts and successful attempts of things like, well, South Park, you mentioned that. Archer, Invincible, most recently, that are tailoring animation for adults or young adults, or and this I think what's impactful here and what's important to point out is that this is Disney making one of those, right? Arguably, they haven't done that since the Black Cauldron, right? And that's a movie they want to forget exists.
Actually, I don't think that was supposed to be so mature. It just accidentally
no, I don't think
was because
yeah. So I think that could be, this could be a good signal for what makes animation, specifically cinematic animation. This could be a good signal for how the industry might be changing if Disney's willing to make a movie like this, a movie using popular animated characters, referencing popular animated shows, but making a story explicitly for adults. That's big. That's a big deal. And because usually that stuff has to come from like an independent studio, not from, like you said, the company that owns everything. And like Nintendo wants to be as squeaky clean in a lot of ways as possible, right? Or else there wouldn't be the ongoing debate of, is Marvel going to make a Deadpool movie?
Well, it is.
So like to me, like this is a big deal as an animation fan,
and I think it was fun too. I mean, it was kind of dark. It was serious. I mean, like there's stuff you're like, ooh, that was unexpected, but they still managed to have fun with it. They still managed to poke fun at things. Again, having the uncanny valley was just that this whole moment you're like, oh my gosh, you're making that joke, or having these characters like, oh, that's you're bringing character, like I said, Ugly Sonic. I mean, one of the characters is basically the Coca-Cola polar bear, right? Like it's not. It's intended to be. That's one of the ones where apparently they couldn't get that. It's
legally distinct from the right. Yeah. Goddamn Coca-Cola.
I mean, all just
always playing the hard game,
stuff like that. And yeah, I guess it was weird because it was. I think this movie is a lot more than maybe it was advertised as. And I think in that regard, I think it's actually a pretty. I recommend it. I think there's some good laughs. I think there's some good, but it is. I think it probably hits a lot better if you're like in your 30s and 40s, where you understand some of the things they talk about. Right, they have a whole scene about that time, right, where like there's a bit about Pogs. God, I imagine there's someone who's gonna be like, "What the hell is that?" Like, yep, exactly. We were all wondering that too, and we were alive there. Right, but it's the thing. Right. We know when they're like, "Oh yeah, the Chip and Dale collectors Pogs." Like, oh, I have no doubt that was a thing. Yeah, so
right. You know that meme of Leonardo DiCaprio on a couch holding a beer, like pointing at a TV. That's what they want the audience to do throughout this whole movie. Like when I guess spoiler alert, Dale takes people to his collection. He's got a room dedicated to Rescue Rangers memorabilia. I'm like, I see the Rescue Rangers Nintendo game. I'm like, oh, I had that. Playing scenes from the show. It's an interesting play on nostalgia. It's not precious with the property, which is really surprising. I think it's also an interesting. I'd have to think about it more about using the format of like a noir kind of crime story.
Rescue Rangers movie.
Rescue. Yes, but and actually making like a hard-boiled noir, not rescue Chip and Dale movie. Was also, I'm like, they could have done a lot of things. They could have made just a straight-up action movie or something like that. I think if I'm comparing it with Roger Rabbit, I mean, ultimately Roger Rabbit is about the Los Angeles transit system. So like, there's a little more nuance, but I think that they not only had fun playing against the tropes of animated characters, animated shows, and the preciousness of youth animation, they also had fun playing with the tropes of noir. And what I'm saying there is there's just classic noir fiction of people who you thought were friends that are not, and then subverting that even with just flippant dialogue and behaviors from characters that just made it, like you said, it was like there's genuine laughs here, like really funny stuff, and it just like it propelled me along the story. As much as the story itself, just like, oh, how are they going to subvert this? Like, it kind of actually seems like a movie kind of made for you, because I know you enjoy a lot of metafiction and subverting the fiction that it's commenting on, and it was just kind of doing that at every turn.
Yeah, no, I didn't know what to expect when I started watching it, but I did enjoy it quite a bit. It's the kind of thing where it's like, wow, because I think maybe because I wasn't as big a fan of the Rescue Rangers, I was like, I'll watch this. I don't know what to expect. And I'm like, ooh, actually, this is really quite good for me. And unexpectedly, just, I keep saying that because it really was just like, oh, wow, they did a lot with it. And there's a lot of like funny gags and meta humor. I mean, there's a scene where, is it that Seth Rogen runs into himself, right?
He runs into himself like 3 times. Yeah.
There's a joke where he voices like 3 or 4 characters, and I think they have a scene where they all like meet each other, right? Or they run into each other. It's like just Seth Rogen talking to other characters he's portrayed, right? And it's still just like the villain. I can't. I was when it reveals who the villain is and like kind of how his story, I was just like, oh my god, like this is this kind of, it is a trashy noir, like I don't know, like I was the top in my class, whatever, doing great, and I started doing knockoffs, and you're like, what is going on here, right?
Yeah.
And of course, making fun of the whole knockoff industry, right, as well. Oh look, it's not Aladdin, it's Prince, whatever. I mean, and they even have like these posters and these like these scenes, and it's like, wow, they're just making a knockoff of their own thing for the purposes of the story, which again, I thought was all really interesting and neat and fun and enjoyable. So yes,
yeah. I think there's more to think about. I'd have to watch it again. I think it's making an interesting commentary on animation. I think it's also making an interesting commentary on comic conventions, or pop culture conventions, because that's the whole movie is kind of kicks off around a pop culture convention. But on its surface, just on one watching, it's just a fun romp. But yeah, if you have young kids that absolutely love classic Disney characters, maybe let them give it a couple years before they watch this one, because they drag some characters through the mud in delightful ways and hilarious ways. I will also say, keep a sharp eye out, although it's kind of in your face, for a cameo from Optimus Prime.
Right, and there's Transformers. Like who'd have guessed? So I do, right? I did enjoy it, and again, I think mostly just the fact that they were able to get this. I'm just surprised that they were able to use what was essentially this failure that was Sonic the Hedgehog. And actually, part of me wonders, is that kind of thing where either was it a similar and the same animation studio, so they're like, oh, let's load it up, or was it that thing where they called up, hey, do you guys still have your model? Can we buy it from you?
Right.
Like, right.
That's interesting. Yeah, I wonder if it is. I had to check that out.
Because it was that kind of thing where when they first introduced the character, they emphasize how ugly he is, and he is, right. He was funky teeth and everything.
They zoomed in on the teeth and everything. Yeah, it's a good time, a surprising good time from people that were maybe going into it. I was going into it skeptically. You were going into it sort of, without much expectation. But actually, I don't know if they released it theatrically.
No,
I'd have to check that.
It was
I think
Disney
it was
exclusive.
Disney Plus. Interesting. That's a shame. Well, is it? I don't know. But yeah, I can compensate with it being a sort of doing a lot of fourth wall breaking, meta commentary on the genre. Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, as it's titled, is definitely the Deadpool of Disney afternoon adaptations. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can also find us on other social media such as Twitter and Instagram. On Twitter, you can find us at our respective handles, which means you can find Andrew tweeting about role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games specifically, at Profound Dark. And you can find me at Bethel. You can also find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at Profound Brick, and me and my work at Bethel Comics.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube. Or you may already be there because we also post our episodes to YouTube as well. So you could listen there. If you are listening there, please feel free to like and subscribe.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4. They're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. Whether a text review or using the proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. Now, it might not be my favorite, but I think musically, the Rescue Rangers theme of the Disney Afternoon themes is the most interesting. I'm not saying it's my favorite. but it's really interesting. It starts with that very minor kind of thing before going to the... It's almost like a Queen song. I was thinking about that while listening to it the other day after watching the movie. I'm like, I just want to listen to this theme again. It starts off like Princes of the Universe, right? Where it's really like, here we are, right? But in the case of Rescue Rangers, it's like, sometimes, it's all very mysterious, but until it gets to like the loungy groove, right? There's no case too big, no, hey, how you going, right? And I'm just saying, if the movie Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers is the Deadpool of Disney afternoon adaptations, I think the Rescue Rangers theme is the Queen song of Disney afternoon theme songs.
Okay, I mean, that's a take.
Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong.
I mean, I can't.
What's your favorite Disney afternoon theme song?
I don't know. I really don't know. Actually, one of my big comment with that was the realization at some point when I discovered that the theme to Darkwing Duck had a whole extra verse that never played, unless you watched it on not the Disney afternoon. Because I saw it on like a Saturday morning and it had like an extended version. I'm like, what is this? And then I found out apparently all the theme songs actually had extended versions for like the soundtrack LP, right? Or
even they record more just for time because episodes can run short or long. And once you realize that, every time you watch a TV show that has a theme song, you're like, oh, it's a short theme song this time. That means they went a bit long in the story there. Or it's the full theme song. It's like, oh, they ran out of stuff to do in this episode. And so you can always. I'm not saying you're judging the quality of it, but you at least notice it.
But
and knowing's half the battle.
Yeah, but hey, I still am thoroughly entertained by the one episode of DuckTales where Glomgold does the theme. So
yes, that is very good. That's very good. I mean, you dodged the question about answering. You dodged the question. You didn't give us your answer, but sometimes that's what you got to do to keep our dear listeners invested. We don't want to split people apart. We want to bring them together. So until you dodge a question, dear listener, let me say that again. So until you dodge a question, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
That was a crime! Slipping through the cracks.
But these two fat asses.
Gumshoes!
What?
Whoa!
What?
Whoa! Whoa! Andrew's instigating editorial changes. And I'll talk about Chip 'n Dale.
Rescue Rangers.
Nope. There we go.
Or we could just talk about Chip 'n Dale.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I saw it like the weekend it came out.
Have you seen it? Did you know there's a Chip 'n Dale movie out?
Rescue Rangers.
No! Stop it! Stop it!
I don't know why you're so upset.
That's my secret, Cap.
I'm me always grumpy.